I grew up in the Rocky Mountains of beautiful British Columbia, a place where the high rocky peaks protected our small valley from the world's concerns. A small Canadian town, streets weaving amongst the hills like there was no plan when it was founded. The horizon, laced with pines and snow-capped peaks. In winter, the snow came in softly, blanketing the world in glittering purity. The air smelled of wood smoke and earth, and the sky turned the color of steel. In summer, it opened into an endless blue dome, buzzing with insects and the sounds of children's laughter. The town was big enough that you didn't know everyone, but everyone watched out for their neighbor. My one journey beyond Canada had been a family trip to Oregon as a boy, a thin slice of highway and ocean that seemed, at the time, like the far edge of the map. Everything beyond that was a rumor, a photograph, a documentary on television. Yet beneath that quiet surface, a different current moved. I carried a dream that did not fit inside our town limits. I wanted to leave the land behind and step into the world of offshore drilling, to become a consultant representing the operator on a jackup or a semi-submersible rig, out on a heaving sea where steel towers rose from the water like man-made mountains. I did not know what that truly meant. I only knew it sounded rare and dangerous and important, the kind of work that leaves a mark on a life. At the time, I was only a young driller. I knew how to trip pipe, how to feel weight on bit through the brake handle, how to read the tired lines on my crew's faces at 4 in the morning. I was eager and I was green. I had no idea what it would cost to chase that dream. Fate did not announce itself with trumpets. It arrived in the classifieds, a short box Toyota Land Cruiser for sale. The picture showed sun-faded paint, squared-off lines, a truck that looked as if it belonged on the edge of some forgotten road. It was the kind of machine a young man imagines pointing at the horizon and not stopping. I dialed the number and left a message. Days passed, then weeks. No reply. Life slid back into its rhythm of hitches and days off. The dream of the truck drifted into the same hazy corner of my mind where the dream of working overseas lived, bright and distant and probably out of reach. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. I picked up. Nothing, just breathing and static. I was about to hang up when a voice arrived, thin and stretched, as if it had crossed half the planet to find me. "Do not hang up. I am calling you from Bangladesh. There is a delay." The man introduced himself as Mike, owner of the Land Cruiser. His voice carried the dry humor and deep fatigue of someone who has spent too many nights under fluorescent lights and too many days under a different sun. He told me he was a tool pusher on a land rig in Bangladesh. In that moment, something shifted. The truck was no longer the main attraction. The man behind the voice was. He was living the life I had only dared to imagine. He would be coming home soon, he said. We agreed to meet. When I arrived at his house, jet lag was just a word to me, not a feeling. I had no real sense of what it means to fly through night and time zones and step into your own front room half awake and half dreaming. Mike opened the door with a tired smile that brightened when he saw the case of beer in my hands. The house smelled of homecoming, laundry detergent, warm air, the faint trace of unfamiliar places still clinging to open luggage. We sat in his living room. I began to interrogate him in the way only the young and hungry can. What was it like overseas? How had he started? Was there a path for me? What did the work look like, feel like, smell like? He listened. Then he tilted his head and asked a few questions of his own. "Do you have a passport?" "No," I said. "Vaccines? Yellow fever? Anything?" Again, no. He shook his head and laughed. Not unkindly, more like a veteran looking at a recruit who has shown up on parade without boots. "All right," he said. Then we start at the beginning. In that simple sentence, my life pivoted. He told me he was about to begin a new assignment in Nigeria. There might be a spot for me as a driller if I was serious, but there were conditions, non-negotiable and immediate. I needed a passport. I needed my shots, especially yellow fever. I needed a clean, updated CV. Only then could he push my name forward. I left that house with my heart hammering and a checklist that felt like a map out of gravity. The next weeks became an expedition through bureaucracy. Passport photos, taken under harsh lights, trying to hold a neutral expression while my thoughts raced ahead of me. Forms filled out at kitchen tables, the ink slightly smudged where my hand trembled. Waiting rooms that smelled of disinfectant and tired people as nurses slid needles into my arm. Tetanus, hepatitis, yellow fever. The sharp sting followed by a spreading warmth. Each injection, a small promise to a future self I had not yet met. I rebuilt my CV, turning a handful of years on the brake handle into something that looked like the beginning of a career. Every completed task felt like a step away from the mountains and the safe, known roads. I could almost feel the orbit of my life widening. Then the world went quiet. Days lengthened. My inbox stayed empty. My phone did not ring. Doubt crept in, patient and methodical. Maybe Mike had simply humored me. Maybe the opportunity had evaporated in a conversation I was not part of. Maybe I had been foolish to believe that a dream that big could arrive so easily. Then, without warning, it did. An email appeared. No ornate message, no preamble, just an itinerary. Calgary to Amsterdam, Amsterdam to Lagos. I stared at the screen, the way the letters and numbers seemed sharper than usual, as if the monitor understood the weight of what it was showing me. The world beyond the documentary frame was no longer imaginary. I had a seat assigned. The flight from Calgary to Amsterdam felt almost ordinary. The cabin smelled of coffee, reheated meals, and stale air, the universal perfume of long flights. Passengers settled in with the ritual of seatbelts, headphones, blankets, folded and unfolded. For a while, I could pretend I was just another traveler, going somewhere on business, returning soon. Then I walked to the gate for Lagos. The crowd shifted. The palette of faces and voices changed. For the first time in my life, the room around me was almost entirely black. I was the only white man standing at that gate. A quiet awareness settled over me. The world had flipped. Back home, I had always been part of the unmarked background, moving through streets and shops without thinking about the color of my skin. Here, I was an anomaly. The glances I felt were not hostile, not exactly, but they were sharp, curious, measuring. Something inside me tilted. I understood, in a small and incomplete way, what it might feel like to step off a plane into Canada as a stranger, carrying a different accent, a different history, wrapped in clothes that mark you as not from here. I boarded the plane with my boarding pass held a little tighter than before. As the aircraft taxied, doubt slid back into the empty seat beside me. Was this real, or had I been naive? Had I misread everything and delivered myself into a situation I did not understand? Stories I had heard in rigs and bars replayed themselves. Kidnappings, ransom, corruption. The engines roared. The runway blurred beneath us. Fear and earth fell away at the same time. Hours later, clouds parted, and the lights of Lagos flickered through a thick haze. The door opened. Heat rushed in. The air was a wall, hot, humid, thick with the smell of jet fuel, sweat, dust, smoke, and something metallic and sour that belonged to cities where the temperature never really drops. Inside the terminal, noise crashed over me. Voices in layers, languages folding over each other. Speakers crackled, fans turned lazily, moving more noise than air. I watched the carousel turn. Bag after bag slid past. Mine did not. In the arrivals area, there was no driver holding my name on cardboard. No friendly company logo. Outside, the crowd pressed against the barriers in a restless tide. Men called out offers, taxis, hotels, tours. Hands waved, eyes scanned. When I stepped toward the exit, I felt it. 100 glances converging, sliding over my clothes, my bags, my skin, curiosity, calculation, a hint of something sharper at the edges. Instinct pulled me back. I retreated into the airport, into the harsh fluorescent light and the illusion of order. I had no local SIM, no working internet, no company contact at hand. My laptop showed me a familiar desktop and absolutely no way to reach anyone. My flip phone might as well have been a stone. I filed a lost baggage report with an agent whose expression suggested this was not the most exceptional event of her day, then found a chair and began to wait. The hours dragged. The air grew thicker, as if the terminal itself were breathing slowly, exhaling humidity. My shirt stuck to my back. My eyes burned. The chorus of voices never really stopped. Afternoon faded to evening. The light outside shifted from white to gold to bruised purple. Just as the first threads of panic began to pull at my composure, a man approached. He said he was my driver. Suspicion flared like a match. "If you are my driver," I said, "tell me my name." He answered without hesitation, "Jonathan." Hearing my name, my full name, in his voice was like stepping into a pocket of cool air. Relief washed through me, but it carried grit. I still did not know the shape of the world I had entered. "We must go," he said. "We need to reach the car before dark. Do not walk, run." We ran into the Lagos evening, through a maze of people and vehicles, headlights and shadows. The heat wrapped around us, thick and alive. At a Toyota Hilux, we skidded to a halt. 2 men in military fatigues climbed in, one to my left, one to my right. Each carried an AK-47. The rifles settled against my legs with the heavy, undeniable weight of steel and intent. The doors slammed. The question that filled the cab was simple. Was this protection, or was this the beginning of a story that would not end well for me? The city swallowed us. Lagos at night was an assault on the senses. Headlights carved white tunnels through the darkness. Horns blared without pattern, an angry symphony of impatience. People moved everywhere, balancing baskets, weaving between cars, gathered around smoky cooking fires on the roadside. Poverty was not an abstract concept. It was etched into every scene. We passed families clustered under sagging corrugated roofs, the glow from a single bare bulb spilling onto cracked concrete and dirt. Children played in the wash of headlights beside open drains. A man with one leg dragged himself along the roadside, hand over hand. The air streaming through the half-open window carried smoke from cooking fires, exhaust fumes, sweat, sewage, and something sweet and rotting beneath it all. It was thick enough to taste. Wedged between 2 armed men in the back of that truck, I stared out at a city that felt like another planet. The quiet, ordered streets of my hometown became a distant memory. Eventually, we turned through a gate into a walled compound. The noise dulled, like someone had closed a door on the city, but not entirely sealed it. Inside, the driver listened as I explained that my luggage had not arrived. "Not possible to go now," he said. "You fly domestic in the morning. I will go collect it." Then he extended his hand. With a grin, he said, "Passport." In that moment, my inexperience showed itself. Without hesitation, I placed my passport in his hand, along with my yellow fever card. The only documents that proved who I was, the only proof that I had the right to leave the country I had just entered. I kept only photocopies, flimsy and suddenly ridiculous. 5 minutes, he said, and turned away. 5 minutes stretched. The house was dim and bare, barred windows rattling in their frames each time the night breathed. There was no food waiting, no water, no clean clothes. The heat wrapped around me even indoors. Sweat dried on my skin and left behind a tight, salty film. Outside, the city continued its nocturnal life, louder now, shouts, sharp bursts of laughter, distant engines, dogs barking. Voices rose and fell in languages I could not understand. Somewhere, a radio blared music, then cut off. Men laughed in short, hard bursts. Then, threading through the noise, came a sound unlike the rest. Short, mechanical, stuttering. I did not have the experience yet to name it for what it was. I only knew that every instinct I had screamed that something very serious was happening somewhere out there in the dark. 5 minutes became 1 hour, then 2, then 3. By 3 in the morning, I was still alone. No luggage, no passport, no idea when, or if, the driver would return. My world had shrunk to the 4 walls of that small house, the barred windows, and the sounds of a city that was teaching me its rules, whether I wanted to learn them or not. Exhaustion finally overwhelmed fear. I slept in a chair, back crooked, neck aching, dreams crowded with flashes of headlights and rifles. At first light, a knock landed on the door. I opened it to find the driver smiling, suitcase in hand, passport and yellow fever card balanced neatly on top as if nothing was more natural. Anger flared, brief and hot. He had said 5 minutes, then vanished into an entire night. Later, I would understand that in Nigeria, 5 minutes can mean soon, later, or when it happens. Time flexes differently there. Clocks exist, but they do not rule with the same iron precision as in my hometown. At that moment, I only knew we were moving again. "We go now," he said. We climbed back into the Hilux and rolled out into the early light. As we turned onto a side street, the city presented me with a final lesson. A car lay on its side ahead of us, engulfed in flames. The fire burned bright orange against the pale morning. Smoke climbed into the sky in a thick black column. The metal skin of the vehicle was freckled with neat, round holes. Bullet holes. 3 bodies hung out of the shattered windows, limbs suspended, silhouettes warped by heat. The smell reached us before the heat did. Burning rubber, fuel, cloth, and the unmistakable, sickening edge of burned flesh. My blood ran cold. The driver said nothing. I said nothing. The silence inside the truck became a living thing. I had been in Nigeria for less than a day, and already the scales had fallen from my eyes. The world was not safe, simply because I meant no harm. I was not protected by innocence. If I wanted to walk this path, I would have to grow up quickly. At the domestic airport, I boarded a de Havilland Dash 8, a twin turboprop I knew from my time as an apprentice aircraft mechanic. That knowledge was not entirely comforting. As the aircraft shuddered down the runway and lifted into the thick air, I watched the main gear fold into the wells with a mechanic's eye, listening for sounds that did not belong. We turned toward Warri in Delta State, a name spoken in lowered tones even by Nigerians, a place associated with militancy, kidnappings, and unrest, a place that, to many, existed as a warning more than a destination. The engines settled into a steady drone. The cabin smelled of warm, plastic, nervous sweat and faint fuel. Outside the small oval window, Lagos dissolved into a haze of roofs and water and smoke, then into the pale, worn green of the Delta. I was flying not just into another country, but into a different version of myself, into a world where the rules I had grown up with no longer applied. My adventure was only just beginning, and as that small aircraft carved its way through the West African sky, a single thought circled in the back of my mind, steady as the sound of the engines. Had I just stepped into the greatest opportunity of my life, or into a mistake so profound that, one way or another, I would never truly come back the same? Thank you for joining me for part 1 of my journey in Nigeria. Please like this video and subscribe to Practical Energy Insights. Join me in part 2 for more from Nigeria and for future stories from Libya, Russia, and many other remote locations. Practical Energy Insights wishes you a pleasant day. Thanks for watching.